profanity and spoiler warning for the following. So now we're at the point where the DCU is releasing decent films while the Marvel Cinematic Universe has put out consistent dumpster fires. The world truly hasn't been the same since the dreaded 2020 paradox. A year-long break from the MCU has left many craving all the new Marvel superhero content that's out right now, and left others forgetful about what happened in the older movies. I'm concerned for the future of the MCU after viewing all these recent Phase 4 entries. Just so you know, I have not watched any episode of What If. It doesn't really interest me. It just looks like Disney's attempt to vaguely rip off the Elseworld and What If comic storylines that already exist. Something about it feels and looks way too cookie cutter for me to care. This video isn't meant to completely rain on the hype train parade that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but more of a checkup, a time to give some tough love when you notice your wayward son has lost his way.
How dare you attack the son of Odin!
An intervention when you see a franchise grow from an ambitious cinematic undertaking into a flanderized version of itself made to pump out the next sequel, and then the next sequel, and then a spin-off of the sequel, and then a spin-off of that spin-off, and then 2 prequel films, and then a team-up, another new team, and then another team coming together where they face a time travel sequel, and a different sequel that brings back everyone that died. Damn, this franchise really lost its mind. By all means, disagree with everything I say if that's how you feel, though I do want you to at least take everything I say into consideration. I should also say that I'm a huge fan of the MCU myself. I remember watching the first Iron Man film in 5th grade with my dad. A lot of us have grown up with this franchise as one of the many things we all consumed in media. Because of that, we've also seen the highs and lows of it. People think that the new MCU content is different and even better in some instances than the last 20 plus movies that we've gotten, claiming that every story is now trying new things and going different places, which is true when you look at how everything has progressed and some plot points, I guess. However, I think these most recent entries are further examples of the glaring problems that have plagued the films in the past. Inconsistent character writing, bad jokes, dicey world building, underdeveloped characters, bad jokes, wasted climaxes, nonsensical plots purely meant to move characters from point A to B, terrible villains, and did I say bad jokes? Discussing the issues with these entries is important to form the greater picture that is the overall bleak future for the MCU. Not financially, of course. This franchise will probably still be making money years after this video has gone up. I mean a bleak future in terms of genuinely good storytelling. One where we see it jump a flaming shark over the same chasm that Fast and Furious crossed years ago. Bro, they really sent these Negroes to space. Alright y'all, don't get mad at me when I say this, but I think one of the things dragging the MCU down is how it's becoming so much like the comics. Hear me out. Obviously, there are some big plus sides to this. We're still seeing lesser known characters and stories get more shine, and that's always cool to see when done well. Keyword being well. However, comics also have the problem of bringing in all kinds of new writers of varying qualities and ideas to write for established characters that are also constantly rebooted, even if said ideas don't mesh well with said character. Remember when someone thought it was a good idea to turn Captain America into a Nazi? Not even mentioning all the reboots, Elseworld stories, retcons, multiverse level events, and different versions of multiple characters that also exist alongside whatever the main one is supposed to be at the time. Some writers balance these ideas better than others. Now we're seeing a lot of the same concepts and storylines being introduced in the MCU, but that comes with the disaster that is Hollywood, where you get writers who don't know how to read comics writing for comic book characters adapted to film and TV, or writers who write their scripts in 11 days. How hard is it to figure this shit out? You just read from left to right like any other book, and even if you have trouble, the dialogue and panels will give you context clues on how everything flows. Hell, if you were somehow that lazy, just watch this shit ton of videos from comic book creators on YouTube, and the fans are really trying to posit all these ideas on how Wandavision would go down. Also, man, those 11 days really show in that movie.
Sever the nerve.
Natasha, you do know that you can probably just snipe him, right? Or just stand across the room and shoot him? Why not bring a gas mask that can block out the pheromones? You could also get someone who's loyal to you that's fully capable of killing Dreykov that isn't a widow and would gladly do it for you. I wonder who they could have gotten to kill Dreykov for them in this hypothetical plan. Please, give this character something to do other than be the idiot father for his fake family. Y'all somehow made the Russian spy super soldier the most useless person on your team. That's a genuinely impressive level of shitty writing. We also have directors who admit they don't know how to explain plot holes in their own films because they wanted to leave it up to the audience. on some ambiguous ending type of shit. There's actually a deleted scene that explains what happens at the end of the film, but it's really redundant, and it again makes Ross look like a moron. She could have just left with her family and the other widows and reunited with the Avengers off screen. It would have achieved the exact same thing. This constant flux of new people just means new ways and chances for things previously established to be meddled with or just outright ignored depending on what that creator wants for the story. It doesn't seem like there are any solid rules to keep creators in line when their ideas don't mesh with the rest of the MCU's continuity, which has been one of those persistent problems plaguing the MCU. Even the movies that people liked fuck with the world building. Winter Soldier was basically the first Marvel entry to shit all over it by having hired to grow within S.H.I.E.L.D., meaning that they would have had multiple opportunities to kill any of the Avengers before they even became the Avengers. Hell, if any of them were in New Mexico with Coulson, they could have had a chance to kill Thor while he was still mortal. That's not even mentioning the fact that they let S.H.I.E.L.D. keep the Tesseract for so long when they could have taken it for themselves and out of their possession. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, doesn't hold up that well. Let that be the first hot take of this video. As for Black Widow, setting it in the middle of Civil War only makes it worse. Because Natasha is a fugitive on the run helping Cap and Bucky escape, they now have an excuse to kick all the boys out of the movie. Their words, not mine. However, Natasha makes no attempt to maintain her cover the entire film. She walks out in public with no disguise, not even that hat, hoodie, and sunglasses combo we've seen everyone else do. She did the hoodie disguise in Winter Soldier, and she had one of those face-changing masks. Both films, for some reason, wait to use the latter choice at the very end. Oh, but of course, we need to see the actor's face clearly at all times. How does no one ever recognize the world-famous superhero?
Why do you always do that thing?
Do what?
The thing you do when you're fighting. This thing that you do when you whip your hair when you're fighting. With the arm and the hair, and you do like a fighting pose. It's a fighting pose.
You know y'all don't have to have this conversation here in front of the clerk, right? How come he's not calling the cops or anything? You'd think the super spies would know how to hide from people in public, but who needs consistent writing when you can throw in a funny? Ross somehow never even gets on their trail after the whole car chase with them and Taskmaster in Budapest or the prior events at the safe house. You remember how quick people were to film the Avengers and Ultron fighting on the news in South Korea? They were filming it live minutes after Cap started fighting Ultron. In The Incredible Hulk, Ross was so persistent, so obsessed with finding Bruce Banner that they were able to find him after Stan Lee got gamma poisoning from drinking a bottle of soda that he bled into from a paper cut, a bottle that came all the way from a factory he worked at in South America. This man had his ears so far down to the ground that he was able to find Bruce and force him to go back on the run just by looking at this one incident of someone experiencing gamma poisoning from drinking soda. Did the writers remember who Ross was? Are we ever going to get another solo Hulk film?
Find out on the next Dragon Ball Z.
They're trying to say that a dude with that level of determination was somehow constantly duped and ignorant of where Natasha was, despite the bare minimum attempts to lay low from her and Yelena. I honestly thought Black Widow was going to take place during the 5-year time gap that happened in Endgame. So many of these problems would have been solved if you had to take place then. Hell, you could even say that the Red Room was easier to find by having half of all of the Widows and Dracov's forces blipped away. And with this, Melina could have the chance to finally turn on Dracov, leading her to free Yelena and send her to Black Widow or something. You could also say that the other Avengers that are still alive are working around the world during this time or going through all the different character arcs that we never got to see in Endgame. This time you would have had a genuinely good reason to kick everyone else out of the plot. You could also play the story on the idea of Black Widow trying to fix a past mistake while her current problems with the blip are destroying her and everything around her. I don't know. I'm just desperately trying to imagine a much better film than the one we got. New people coming in with their own ideas is obviously not a bad thing, but when you're coming into an established universe writing for characters in said universe, then you should take their entire prior history into account. A lot of the new choices made in Phase 4 retroactively make aspects of the universe worse or entirely null and void through retcons and inconsistent character writing. Now Wanda was born with her powers rather than getting them from an Infinity Stone in Baron von Strucker's experiments, and they're also magic, and she can create hexes and mess with the DNA and minds of thousands of different people simultaneously through a large magic barrier hex, and she can affect people's memories outside of the hex, and she can give other people superpowers, and she can create a whole functioning Vision along with 2 kids with superpowers that mirror her and Pietro's abilities and have minds of their own, and she can learn how to do magic despite having little prior experience to it beyond what was retconned into this show. What the fuck are your powers? Wanda's gonna look really really dumb if she ever uses any of these abilities again in a fight. Just think, if she can create a whole Vision at will, what's to stop her from creating a Thor, an Iron Man, a Captain America, or even a Captain Marvel in the future? Sounds pretty OP to me. Things that happen in the past movies don't matter unless they're needed in the plot for some specific reason or to make some stupid fucking joke.
Is it your time of the month?
I don't get my period, dipshit. I don't have a uterus. Or ovaries. Yeah, that's what happens when the Red Room gives you an involuntary hysterectomy. They kind of just go in and they rip out all of your reproductive organs.
The feminist superhero film Black Widow casually jokes about how widows had their reproductive organs stolen from them in a process meant to turn them into enslaved assassins obedient to a man. Way to empower your superheroes, Marvel. Also, notice how they give the stupid man character the period joke to say to his own daughters after not seeing either of them for decades. Even if you wanted to make a funny joke and just use dumb Alexi to do it, it's still a shitty and overused joke. And why is Yelena so casually jokey about an invasive reproductive procedure forced upon her, especially when she's fresh off of the mind control? Shouldn't this be way more traumatic, more somber? She hasn't had years to adjust like Natasha has, yet she behaves just like any normal person when she's not on the mind control, as if she wasn't just a mindless killing machine just a few days before all of this. Hell, even when Natasha had years to become somewhat normal, she still had an extremely hard time talking about the Red Room and how it affected her. Why do you guys treat your characters like jokes? Are people so blindly shilling for Marvel now that even the smallest and most unnecessary jokes seem appealing to them as long as it comes from one of these films?
Honestly, a frank conversation about hysterectomies in the MCU? Sign me up.
I guess so. Also, wouldn't this whole family reunion not be more somber if these characters really were a family at some point? It's their fake dad they're busting out of prison, who last time we saw handed them over to Dreykov. I feel like there should be a lot of unresolved emotions here. Why not turn this into a nice somber or even a happy reunion of characters versus another dumb quip moment? Now, it can be argued that, Tassan, you're just a sourpuss, lighten up, not everything needs to be so serious. Which, yeah, this hypothetical person would have a point. However, I'd argue that this is a severely missed opportunity to have some genuinely good moments for characters. Moments that don't make my bulging thyroid eyes roll. We also get examples of blatant character negligence when you get to Falcon and the Winter Soldier and find out that Captain America apparently abandoned Sharon Carter in that 5-year time gap in Avengers Endgame. Y'all know Sharon Carter, the niece of the woman he loved back in his time, and who became a trusted ally to him in his films. Apparently Steve left her high and dry for half a decade. Didn't try to contact Sharon at all. Not to help her, see how she's doing, not even for copy. Did y'all just get really lazy in those 5 years? Steve couldn't even bother to call if she was even still alive after everyone got snapped. Would that not be the time to make sure everyone close to you is still around? We also get this in Wandavision when we find out that Sword took Vision's body. Wakanda nor any of the Avengers had it. Seriously, shouldn't Tony of all people be holding on to Vision? He was sired from an AI that he created and regularly used in his suits. Vision also immediately proved to be a trusted ally. Wakanda could have also held on to the body since he did die there and is made of vibranium. Did they just hand him over to Sword? Did Sword steal him? Are we ever going to get a clear answer to these questions in a future entry?
Find out on the next Dragon Ball Z.
The best explanation I've seen on the internet for this is that Sword acquired his body through the Sokovia Accords and pulling some strings here and there. Makes a lot of sense considering that it grants government control over the Avengers. Problem is that I got this explanation from the internet and not the show itself. And so many other people in that same thread admitted that they were also curious about how this happened as well. I really hope there's some deleted scene to explain this and that this whole part of the video is just bullshit. It feels like the writers don't care about the past world building of these films or the established behavior of characters in past films. Absent characters are now remembered well or poorly depending on how cynical the writers want to be in their story, even if the behavior is completely out of character for said character. Despite all the new people being brought in, a lot of these Marvel products still follow the same formulas and approaches to their storytelling, meaning people who don't know how to write comedy that well always want to throw in cringy ass jokes.
This would be a cool way to die.
Worse than any joke is what they've done to characters old and new in the franchise. I understand that writers want their specific story told or are tasked with telling a certain story, but you have to take everything these characters have been through into consideration when you start writing for them, especially in a long-running cinematic universe, a precedent set by your own franchise. Justice League and Justice League Unlimited had characters with shows that came out in the 90s, yet those writers found ways to keep recurring characters consistent and showed how past events influence current problems. Darkseid's beef with Superman in Justice League makes so much more sense when you see everything he did to him in Superman the Animated Series. Blasting him with his Omega beams, killing his friend Dan Turpin, kidnapping him twice, and the second time resulted in him brainwashing Superman into thinking he was his son. It's no wonder that he's one of the few enemies that Superman has no problem with killing.
Time and again I've beaten you, humbled you. What makes you think today's outcome will be any different?
Because this time, I won't stop until you're just a greasy smear on my fist. Let's go.
Emil Hamilton didn't decide to distrust Superman and help build Cadmus just because that was the point of the story. He did it because he experienced firsthand what an out-of-control Superman is capable of thanks to Darkseid. Even if it was a one-time thing for the Superman, that one time was enough to affect how the rest of the DCAU moved forward. Prior events in the universe, whether grand or small, matter. So someone tell me why in Black Falcon and the White Wolf, Sam, the soldier who used to counsel other soldiers reacclimating to society, chooses to fight a fellow soldier in need after witnessing the murder of his best friend. Something Sam would easily relate to, but I don't think these writers remember rightly. He and Bucky also don't have anything to say about Lamar's death when he's part of the foil dynamic he and John have with Bucky and Sam. And when he's another black soldier that died fighting the person Sam continues to make excuses for. The biggest irony of this is the fact that Sam's arc revolves around him recognizing the sacrifice another black soldier made in the past. Correlation between character and theme? What's that? Do you also hate Lamar purely for his association to Walker, Sam? If so, that's really childish. And while they've turned Sam into the race man of the show as the new Captain America, I can't help but feel like he was better off as Falcon. For some reason, people have this weird obsession of having a black version of a white hero a lot of the time versus the multitude of original characters, but I digress. Anytime this happens, that character will pretty much sit in that OG character's shadow. To this day, Miles still has to borrow a lot of Peter's villains, and with Sam still having to earn the role and title, I can't help but remember the badass hero he was as Falcon, the dude who already earned his place as one of the Avengers, but whatever. Now we need to remind everyone how important it is to have a black Captain America, because they're always going to let you know how black his ass is. These stories will also often try to delve into serious shit like racism, but will only really touch on the surface of these types of problems. Sam gives a whole speech telling the senator to do better with the Blip refugees, but likely turns around and moves on with his superheroing while the GRC actually handles the problems he admits to knowing little about. I'm sorry, Sam, but you're gonna have to do better than being a black man carrying the stars and stripes. Sam nor Bucky even had the decency to speak to Lamar's family afterward. Of course, Walker went and saw them since that was his best friend, but the show's own self-proclaimed race man, Sam Wilson, doesn't have shit to say when it happens. Lamar's life didn't matter to him. He showed far more care towards a deranged supercriminal with a fetish for killing people than he did to his fellow black veteran that wasn't Isaiah. This could have been another interesting way to explore the scene with Sam's character as well. Like Sam and Bucky could feel a sense of guilt that Lamar died on their watch, but that would mean getting past their hate boner for John Walker. The writers of the show could barely even get past that. Why not have Sam and Bucky be more cooperative with them from the start, only for the relationship to break down due to their differences? Maybe Bucky and Lamar could be the cool ones while Sam and Walker's relationship deteriorates over time. I don't see why Bucky would be so combative to working with him right from the jump. The man's a World War II vet turned super soldier assassin and finally into a superhero. Certainly a government loyal Captain America isn't the worst thing he's dealt with in the past after being a mindless killing machine for a Nazi organization for decades. I feel like Bucky would be way more chill in how he interacts with everyone now that he's back in control of his body. Sure, he'd still need a long time to fully adjust, but I feel like a soldier coming back from war would mostly just want to chill the fuck out and enjoy life after experiencing so much, after losing so much. I understand why Bucky would be wary of Walker, but Bucky's hate is a little overblown here considering everything he's been through. Here we have someone who's fought all kinds of war non-stop finally have a proper chance at peace turn into a petty child just because someone replaced his friend, who pretty much abandoned him and everyone else to finally get a dance with Peggy Carter and retire. Keep that in mind, y'all. Captain America went to a whole other timeline in Avengers Endgame to be with another Cap's Peggy, and the Time Variance Authority had nothing to say about it when that would have clear ramifications. I guess it was part of Kang's glorious purpose for Captain America to finally get laid. Apparently it was also part of Kang's glorious purpose purpose for the Spross giant beast to be lost in London at the end of Thor: The Dark World. Seriously, what the fuck happened to that thing? That one made one hell of an Easter egg in Far From Home. Also, y'all really trying to convince me that an Avenger is somehow broke while still doing work for the military? Don't y'all get benefits or some shit? Sam, you know there are different kinds of ways to make money in 2023, right? Why not make a Twitch channel and do reactions like T-Pain, or go the YouTube route like Will Smith? You could have a whole channel dedicated to just talking about all your different adventures with the Avengers. Easy 1 million subs right off the bat. Be on some motivational speech type shit.
You've got to do better, Senator.
Now, it can be argued that it's in character for Sam to be a dick to Walker as well, since he was an asshole that a lot of fans hate for some reason. However, I have to be honest and say that I don't really get why Walker is hated this much. You'd think the guy casually killed hundreds of people and joked about it with how bad fans were getting on the character and the actor. Maybe he didn't make enough stupid ass quips for y'all. To be honest, I thought the show was going to play the situation with Sam and Walker like Spider-Man and Electro. In Spectacular Spider-Man, of course, not Amazing Spider-Man 2, cause fuck that movie. Spider-Man is a dick to Electro in their first meeting when he really needed help in dealing with his new condition. He tries to make it up later, but Electro wasn't having any of it.
Look, I messed up before, but now I really want to help.
You want to hold my hand?
I figured the show was going this route of having Sam unknowingly antagonize and push Walker to the point where he'd break, and then to be a situation where Sam realizes, damn, I really should have done more to help Walker before he went off the deep end. However, writing a dynamic like that takes self-awareness, something the current MCU has absolutely none of. A 4-kid Saturday morning cartoon paid more attention to how its titular hero could be a dick to people than the big budget live-action romps. Don't you just hate to see it? The show and the characters just continue to dismiss Walker's attempts to help and befriend him, having them hate the guy to the point that they laugh when he's seconds away from being killed by the Dora Milaje. Also, does anyone else find it a little hypocritical and stereotypical for them to write the tribe of African warrior women to be hyper-aggressive towards everyone to the point that they'd kill them just for unwelcome touching from someone trying to cooperate with them? I get the desire to protect your people, but sheesh, y'all need to chill the fuck out. Zemo escaped because of all y'all being stupid. It's especially ass backwards having them behave this way in a show that's trying to have a message about soldiers from other nations coming in and doing shit like this in the name of their land. But it's okay when Wakandans are assholes to everyone else. Now, of course, one could argue Walker deserved it. He was an asshole the entire show. Okay, what examples do we actually have of this? He brutally killed the Flag Smasher dude in public while he was on the ground. A pretty fucked situation overall, but there are some things to take into consideration in this scene. His best friend was killed by their leader just a few minutes before this. This same guy also held Walker back while this was happening, so he's an accomplice in this murder as well. He's also one of the terrorists that they've been trying to apprehend this whole time. This dude has also actively tried to run away and resisted when Walker chased him. Walker could have held back here, but it's a bad heat of the moment situation. Yes, I know it's a really brutal kill, but I think Walker could be cut a little bit of slack here. Besides, Steve killed way more people than he did. You think those helicarriers dropped and Winter Soldier landed safely on the ground without any casualties?
Washington, D.C.
Also, why the fuck are y'all so surprised that he died when he got clocked by a super soldier? Isn't that the goal you were trying to accomplish in the first place? Killing all these American soldiers getting in your way? Are all the weapons and fighting just for show? Aside from this instance and the corny ass, I am Captain America speech he makes while trying to decapitate Sam, what other instance do we have of Walker being a dick? He took up the shield after Sam gave it up and became the new Captain America, a job he was hired to do. You guys really want to hate this man for something Sam let happen by choosing not to be Captain America initially? What the fuck did you think was going to happen to that whole frisbee of vibranium, Sam? No shit they were going to find someone else to do it if you weren't going to do it. Now compare all this to the number of times Walker has actively tried to work with an uncooperative Black Falcon and White Wolf, such as him and Lamar being the cavalry in the highway fight against the Flag Smashers, him bailing Bucky out of jail, and the other times they actively tried to work with them to bring the Flag Smashers down. If you hadn't guessed already, this whole part of the video is meant to call into question why y'all were so blindly hating on John Walker just because the show wants you to. In reality, he's far from the worst character on the show, or even in the MCU. He's just as much of a victim of bad writing as everyone else has been. MCU fanboys and girls blindly hate on the character and the actor both literally for doing their job. You motherfuckers do not deserve nice things, but you clearly deserve every bit of the shitty content we're gonna keep getting in the future since y'all refuse to get off Marvel's nuts. Why does Sam show more sympathy for the terrorist who threatened his family than he did for his fellow soldier? Vast vastly different from how he behaved in the past. That threat honestly should have been the final straw for him. She called your sister and threatened her and your two nephews because of her beef with you, Sam. Not even mentioning the numerous people she kills over the course of the show for her goals. She's the literal definition of a terrorist.
You have to stop calling them terrorists.
Sam, what the fuck? Now you can just have a character behave however they need to for the sake of the story, regardless of what they were like before. We get a Bucky that forgets all his assassin level fighting skills and constantly gets his ass handed to him. A Loki that forgets he's a god of mischief and allows everyone to disrespect him in his own show. And a Black Widow that's okay with her sister committing mass murder with glee. And now above all else, we get a Wanda Maximoff okay with mentally enslaving thousands of people just so she can play house with her dead boyfriend. Even after everything she went through in Age of Ultron. Preaching about how Tony Stark always caused more harm than good, yet here she is making playthings out of people who did nothing to her but be at the wrong place at the wrong time when she finally lost it. Just imagine how many Maximoff twins she created in this town thanks to her actions here, especially considering that her barrier can give people superpowers by affecting them at the cellular level. Westview would pretty much become the breeding ground for future supervillains after this shit. Wanda's actions reinforce every doubt and criticism she and the other Avengers received in Civil War. Even if all this was an accident, it all became deliberate when she actively conflicts with S.W.O.R.D. and expands the Hex when her fake vision is about to disappear. She willingly enslaved and threatened more people with her powers every time she noticed that her fantasy was about to disappear. Even after she saw what it was doing to these people, she clung on to it. Argue all you want about Wanda's grief being the point of the story or whatever, but there's no denying her selfishness. She still finds some way to keep that twisted dream of hers alive by mentally enslaving Agatha as her fake persona and decides that she'll let her out when she feels like it. First off, I have to ask, how does Wanda know for sure that the spell will last in her absence? Especially when Agatha's a more experienced magic user? I guess y'all will find out in that new Agatha Harkness show, for Pete's sake. And I say y'all because Lord knows I'm skipping that bullshit. Secondly, that's a pretty cruel punishment to deal out Wanda. Sure, she's not a good guy, but Agatha's not the one who started or is actively causing all the harm to everyone else in this situation. It's you. She actually hasn't done anything that bad compared to our own protagonist. Now, of course, Wanda being the villain of Wandavision was kind of the point with the story they created. Her immense grief consumed her and drove her to the point where she was just an accident waiting to happen. The problem is that the show doesn't want to have the other characters treat her like the villain she is unless they are villains themselves. Even though Hayward's heel turn was out of nowhere, even Randall Park defends her after giving Scott Lang so much shit in Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is more that severe lack of self-awareness creeping into the writing. How else would the writers think it'd be a good idea to have Monica Rambeau recognize the sacrifices Wanda made in order to save the people of Westview from the danger she put them in?
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
Sacrifice what? Her fake ass family? Her dead ass husband? Those two little shits that aren't even real? I think what Coco really meant to say was they'll never forget what you did to them. Characters can enslave entire towns and still be treated like they're the heroes, when in reality the hero was Agatha all along. At least she appears more heroic when she frees a few of Wanda's meat puppets and calls her out on her actions.
Heroes don't torture people.
You know the superhero game is fucked when the supposed villain of the show is unintentionally more heroic than the hero. And since we're talking about a severe lack of heroism, why are there no other Avengers here to try and help Wanda? Would it not be their responsibility to rectify a situation in which one of their own goes rogue? Like what happened in Age of Ultron when Hulk went crazy? Doctor Strange's whole thing is magic. Why not have him or Wong come here to try and help when this is their forte? How come Hawkeye didn't try to help? He gave Wanda a whole pep talk to help her out in Age of Ultron, and they both comforted each other after losing their loved ones in Avengers Endgame. He even gave his youngest son her brother's name as a middle name. These two have a relationship. Why is no other Avenger here trying to do anything to stop this? Oh, sorry. They're all men, so they totally wouldn't lift a finger to help one of their allies when she's clearly in need. The creators are more interested in superficial politics than telling more meaningful stories with these characters in a natural progression of the world. It's all about how we can virtue signal for the types of people who make fan cams with all their favorite girl boss characters, even when they're horrible people. I don't think any two characters have been assassinated worse than Loki and Black Widow though. Like, holy fuck, these characters are all foobar now. Natasha allows her mass murdering sister and her human trafficking mother to both walk away scot-free after both being responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. She uses a child as her cue to blow up a building to kill a dude that survived with not even a scratch. She never checked on her spy family despite family being a huge thing for her with the Avengers and having more than enough time to see if they were alright. She never even tried to double double check if Dreykov was actually dead? Every time someone in this movie asks why someone else didn't check on them, all they have to say is, "Oh, I didn't know, I just assumed you made it out." Because the intelligent super spy would be careless enough to leave loose ends behind without bothering to check, or to even check to make sure that the women under Dreykov's control were even safe after her attempt on his life. All you've done is make Black Widow look incompetent compared to what she was actually like before, and more hypocritical since the film all takes place during Civil War. Remember how Natasha sided with Iron Man initially because she believed that Tony had a point about the Avengers needing to be kept in check? Because she didn't want to see anyone else die because of their own mistakes after the Lagos incident? Remember how her character always had the component of wanting to help people to make amends for her troubled past? Well, her own solo film shits all over that part of her character. Remember y'all, these events all happen within days of each other. That's how little of a fuck these writers gave. Then there's Noki, which is what I'm calling him because he damn sure ain't Loki. Loki ain't no bitch, unless Hulk is involved.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Now, I don't know about y'all, but I remember Loki being pretty badass in Thor and Avengers. The films they pulled Noki right out of. He was able to fight Thor head on twice, play the Frost Giants and everyone else for fools, including Thor, fight and nearly kill Captain America, a super soldier, fight and kill multiple SHIELD agents, gouge a dude's eye out in front of a crowd while smiling, survive an exploding arrow to his face, and survive this vicious beating from the Hulk. All things that a Norse god of mischief would surely be capable of doing and or surviving. Not even mentioning how he was so close to committing genocide on Jotunheim, his own birth planet. Loki is truly ruthless. So of course, Noki in his own show would put up more than a good enough fight against the TVA agents who are all just normal humans. Oh, well, at least he's still the villain we love.
I don't enjoy hurting people.
Oh, for Pete's sake. So now past villains can be made out to be useless and incompetent for the sake of the story and have whole arcs rushed in one episode. Whereas Loki previously had to go through several films of development before even thinking about being a good guy. Hell, they used a previously good arc he had in those films to try and facilitate the change he has here, emphasizing just how much better that version of the character was versus what they've done with him here. Why bring a badass villain back from the dead only to take out both the villain and the badass parts in his own show? Or is this really Sylvie's show, since she's clearly the real protagonist we're supposed to root for here? She even makes the final climactic multiverse changing decision in the end, not him. His arc revolves around him blindly falling for a less interesting version of himself. When faced with a decision of free will in the multiverse or ruling the multiverse, the main thing he ends up caring about is making sure his lover is okay.
I just want you to be okay.
Loki, of all people, is somehow giving Mordecai a run for his money in terms of simping. It sucks because it could have been interesting. I could see Loki's character going either route with this. His whole goal before was to rule as king of Asgard or to have some kind of rule. It was his game plan in the two films this Loki lived through before this show. Here he's being offered the chance to rule the multiverse. Would the Loki we know not have at least considered that level of power over everything? That'd be like a wet dream for him. As for the other choice, you could argue that Loki would want free will in the multiverse for shits and giggles cause he's the god of mischief and to screw over the TVA. But no, Loki doesn't consider any of this because he's now the classic good guy protagonist rather than the character we've all known him to be. You know what would have made a really interesting twist? What if Loki was the one to turn on Sylvie here? Why not cast her away and take control of the multiverse? That's something Loki would do, and it'd be a great payoff for his character here, going from being a puppet of the TVA to controlling over them and everything in the multiverse, or to screwing them over by killing their leader. And the whole show could have been built up from him playing the TVA for fools the whole time while he was working for them, something that Loki was always known for. All this is telling me that they're more interested in the fan service for these characters versus doing something genuinely interesting with them. They rushed his development to turn him into the good guy character he was at his death. Only thing is, Loki showed way more cojones in his final act than Loki did in his entire 6-episode show. Plus, he had to unlearn years of that mischievous behavior that he never really fully let go of. You're trying to tell me that the Norse god of mischief never enjoyed doing a single violent or heinous thing he did in any of those films? When he killed a bunch of SHIELD agents with a smile on his face? When he gouged a dude's eye out in front of a crowd while grinning? They even joke about how evil he is.
Loki is beyond reason, but he is of Asgard, and he is my brother.
He killed 80 people in 2 days.
He's adopted.
Loki would not feel bad about all the shit he did just because some random asshole in a suit tries to psychoanalyze him. Loki would be like, you bet your ass I did all that evil shit. Hell, you want to know what I plan on doing to you once I get this collar off? That's Loki, not whoever the fuck this dude is.
You threaten my world with war. You steal a force you can't hope to control. You talk about peace and you kill cause it's fun. And you kill cause it's fun. And you kill 'cause it's fun.
I don't enjoy hurting people.
They turned Loki into the same type of stereotypical hero character that he made fun of before.
So tight, with the confidence, I can feel the righteousness surging.
They're gonna let these people die.
Dude, you tried to blow up a whole planet before this shit. Why the fuck do you care? And where the fuck did all that fighting prowess go? Even if someone loses their powers, they'd still know how to fight. Remember how Thor was able to clean house on all those shield agents after Odin took his power? Wouldn't Loki without a collar and in another timeline not be wrecking shit with his bare hands? Also, when Loki and Sylvie are fighting TVA agents without the collars, would they not be wrecking people due to their superior physical strength as Asgardians? Remember how Loki was able to fight and beat up Captain America and Avengers? He was mopping the floor with a super soldier. What the fuck do you think he would do to people who are even weaker than Cap and have to fight him when he's not restrained by anything? And how does the TVA dimension nullify magic and infinity stones? It can dampen Asgardian magic and maybe physical strength? Thor losing his power in the first Thor film made sense considering it was Odin who took it from him. Are there magic runes on the wall like in Wandavision? I've seen someone theorize that. If so, who fucking cast them? It's weird to think that this place would take away Carol Danvers' powers too. In that case, good luck to the TVA agents who try to apprehend her OP ass in the event she becomes a variant. They somehow want me to believe that these incompetent assholes are the most powerful force in the universe versus the beings we've already seen in the MCU. Beings that could literally destroy worlds. To further emphasize my thoughts on why Loki's character switch just doesn't work, let's compare him to Mordecai. Again, if you've seen regular show, then you may be familiar with the first time Mordecai and Margaret kissed each other. It didn't go well since he had really bad breath, so he tries to use the time machine to redo this by telling his past self that he kissed Margaret and it went badly. However, past Mordecai only heard "we kiss Margaret" and tried to use the time machine to get the kiss leading to present Mordecai and Rigby to stop him by destroying the time machines. Now, of course, I realize that this episode doesn't correlate precisely with Loki's change in episode 1. However, I'm using it more to emphasize that simply showing or telling a person how things will go down for them isn't going to immediately change their actions. The timeline was already different from the fact that our Avengers showed up and gave Loki a chance to escape. Yet the show wants Loki to think that his fate was going to be the exact same as this one, or that he'll just end up losing. Any chance he had at winning or losing was lost when the TVA destroyed his timeline. No capitalizing on the blatant fuck-ups of Earth's mightiest quip machines, because that was all meant to happen. Loki has plenty of reason to hate the TVA just like Sylvie, but he allows himself to play second fiddle to her because he's beyond down bad at this point. The show wants me to believe that the TVA could change Loki to the point that he says he never enjoyed violence, and to basically make him a good guy when his own brother couldn't do that for years. I honestly thought Loki was lying to Mobius here when this happened, putting on a facade to pull the ultimate backstab on everyone in the end, using his newfound knowledge. But no, Loki really was just so moved by Lightning McQueen's therapy session. Because do you enjoy hurting people is such a compelling question to ask a dude who tried his bit at being an intergalactic conqueror. Most of the new characters they bring in are either botched from the jump or just boring. Tell me, do you guys think Sylvie or anyone from the TVA were genuinely interesting characters you wanted to see more from? Or are you just waiting for that next Kang story to come out? Do you care about New Falcon? Do y'all really want to see Stockholm Syndrome Rambo continually excuse the selfish actions of our heroes? Everyone's new favorite quip machine, Yelena Belova, had a decent foundation for her character, but they couldn't even be consistent with that in her own debut film. They give Yelena this conversation with Natasha where she talks about the trauma of having her whole autonomy robbed from her and forced to kill people against her will. Reasonable things to be upset about for her character. I just really hope this movie doesn't fuck it up.
This would be a cool way to die.
Oh, well at least she made a quippy, am I right guys? I guess being a killing machine is okay when you do it of your own free will then, huh Yelena? Now I can't even get invested in this character because some dipshit writer thought it would be a good idea to turn a character into a mass murderer for a joke. In a film that takes place during Captain America Civil War, the film that directly deals with the collateral damage caused by the recklessness of superheroes. Fuck any consequences for our new heroes though. Whenever you write characters like this, you're outright telling me not to get invested. That nothing they say or do is genuine in any way. You're telling us from the jump that you think of them as nothing but jokes. That even when we're supposed to take them seriously, the things that made those moments so special are still subject to being shat on by shitty writing. It's even worse when considering this psychopath is supposed to be the next Black Widow, yet she's somehow everyone's favorite new character from this film. Let it be John Walker doing this shit, and you Twitter birds will be having a field day. The fact that things like this even happen just shits all over the world building. Hell, any story after Endgame Endgame is fucked in terms of world building because of the blip. As cool as an idea as this was in concept, it was honestly a bad choice, because I feel like most of the news stories are never going to fully address how bad the blip would have fucked the universe. Falcon and the Winter Soldier was the entry that tried the best to incorporate the blip, but the show still leaves a lot to be desired due to how underdeveloped a lot of the writing is. Carly and the Flag Smashers fall into the cliche of killing for the sake of killing, since the MCU doesn't want their villains to stray too far from the name, especially if the villains have a point. But what is the Flag Smashers' point? They want the world to go back to pre-blip times, back when many of them thrived, when they had a newfound sense of unity and stability, only for it to all change once everyone came back. Carly basically believes in what Thanos was preaching, and the show tries to paint her as this revolutionary. Only this falls so fucking hard on its face. Painting the GRC as the asshole establishment is pretty cheap considering the whole reason they exist. They're trying to accommodate half of the population that snapped back into reality. Yeah, it's pretty fucked that a lot of people still alive from it lost their new homes, but does that automatically mean that the people who came back don't deserve to reclaim what they lost? And it's not even a typical issue of immigrants coming from a poor land to America like in real life. It's half of the world's, the universe's population disappearing and coming back. This would affect everyone in every single social group all over the world. I find it to be a little intellectually dishonest to paint the blip as a right and left type of issue when it is far more complicated than that. I'm not saying that either side is completely right or wrong. I'm saying that trying to paint this wild ass cataclysmic event as a political thing maybe should have required a different approach. It's also funny to me how they try to use a blip and systemic racism as a reason for why Sam is broke, but they have Sam continuously make excuses for the people who thought the world was better off when he and so many other people were dead. Also, were borders just really open willy-nilly like that in the blip? Would people moving during the blip to whole other nations not cause other problems? You guys remember the Did Thanos Kill Me site after Infinity War released, where you could go find out if you got blipped or not? I remember seeing that I was one of the people that got snapped out of existence. Thinking about what it'd be like to be snapped out of existence and then coming back 5 years later would be incredibly jarring. I would have missed my 2 remaining years of college. I still technically wouldn't exist right now. Can you guys imagine the sheer shock of suddenly coming back into a world that's existed without you for 5 years? How do all of our characters even feel about it? Peter and a bunch of his friends apparently all got blipped since they're all still the same age and far from home. What are their thoughts on missing out on 5 years of life and seeing some of their former peers grow up without them? I feel like this shit would have serious psychological ramifications on everyone involved. Every new entry will just vaguely reference it. It feels like a stepping stone in the universe rather than being the cataclysmic event that it was. Shang-Chi has one reference to the blip at the beginning of the film. It's never brought up again, nor does it mean anything to any one of our characters. Did any of them die in this event? Statistically speaking, some of them had to. Did they know someone that died and came back? Were Shang-Chi and Katie wasting their lives at this valet job during those 5 years, or is this a new job? If it was the former, then it would be really interesting to see how that job changed over the years. Did Wenwu or any of the 10 rings get blipped? If so, would that not pretty much cripple the organization and leave it in a huge state of disarray? The blip would have had to affect new characters as well. The film might as well take place pre-Infinity War aside from its one line and its post-credit scenes. There's so much that still hasn't been explored about the blip that I'm just left sorely disappointed by how little these new stories have actually tapped into it. Even Endgame didn't fully delve into the implications an event like this would have. You could honestly have a whole series of movies dedicated to just this part of the MCU, but I don't know how interested new writers will be in exploring it. It'd mean incorporating that aspect into the story behind throwaway lines of dialogue and comedic bits. Now with things like the blip and immense collateral damage not being much of a factor, what consequences do you have? None, I tell you! All the consequences of Infinity War have been erased. Everyone who died in that movie has come back in some capacity. Characters can no longer stay dead, just like in the comics. Ah, resurrection, everyone's favorite trope. Even when Eternals relies on the blip for their plot, it still doesn't explore it well. Did any of the Eternals have anyone they lost in this event? Did any of the Eternals themselves die in this event? It was half of all life after all. If the ultimate goal of the Celestials was to have Eternals birth new Celestials through farming intelligent life on planets, wouldn't it make more sense for them to interfere in cataclysmic events that could delay the births of new Celestials? The blip was an event large enough to affect them and their mission. Thanos' actions would have suppressed the births of Celestials through his constant slaughtering of people, even before he started seeking out the Infinity Stones for himself. The Celestials need a large number of beings living on the planet to be born, so why the fuck wouldn't Arishem try to get the Eternals to stop Thanos when he's about to delay the emergence of a Celestial? Especially if Thanos is a rogue Eternal. And yes, this film confirms that Thanos is an Eternal by introducing his Eternal brother Harry Starfox in the post-credits. I bet you the next writer will come in and say that all the other Eternals in the universe have been killed off by Thanos or something like that to help answer this. Which would then beg the question of how is it that the Eternals of Earth weren't put directly in his path if he's a confirmed threat to them and the Celestials? And why did Thanos make no mention of the Celestials to the Avengers as a motivation for his actions if he did know about them? Feige really hyped this movie up as a potential Oscar contender. This isn't even mentioning the massive sledgehammer Loki and the TVA used to demolish whatever world building or consequences were left. Nothing about the TVA works. I deadass don't even understand how these assholes would function in the comic universe considering all the multiverse events and shit that happens there. Where were y'all when everyone turned into a flesh-eating zombie the first time it happened? Where were y'all when Spidey killed MJ after shooting the club up? Where were y'all when all the heroes were killed off and Old Man Logan and Hulk decided to bang his cousin and have an inbred family for Wolverine to brutally slaughter? That last one was a weird-ass storyline in hindsight. Also, why is it a problem for Loki to pick up the Tesseract as a result of the Avengers' actions, but it's also part of Kang's goal for them to meddle with the timeline? Would the shit they did in Endgame not have serious repercussions? Like Cap staying in a whole other timeline that was also the current one since he became Joe Biden? I don't know. They just needed to find a way to write Cap out of the future movies. Somehow these human variant TVA agents are the ones who watch over and heavily restrict the entire space-time continuum, even keeping Asgardians in check. You know, because a human being could totally take an Asgardian. Remember y'all, none of these characters are as strong as Thor or Loki, yet they were all capable of pulling off superhuman level physical feats of agility, strength, and endurance. You really trying to convince me that these mofos would stand a chance against even one of these guys? They have the advantage of their tech, but beyond that, I don't think they'd actually last, seeing how incompetent they are in the show and seeing how their tech relies on being able to touch their targets. Some of their variant targets would be far more physically capable than them, considering that every TVA agent is a human. That is, unless they wanted to nerf all of their physical capabilities, then why not? Wouldn't be any different than anything they've already done to Loki and Thor. Wouldn't it be a better idea to get beings like Asgardian variants to be TVA agents anyway? You'd be handing OP technology to beings who are on average much stronger and live longer than humans.
Give or take 5,000 years.
Why stop with Asgardians too? You could go back in time and get Kree variants, Skrull variants, hell, maybe even Eternal variants, all to work for the TVA in this case. All would be way more effective fighters than the dumbass humans they actually have in the show. Just imagine being late for work and then a bunch of Thanoses in black pull up on you calling you a variant and bring you back to their base to have a whole trial dedicated to just pruning your sorry ass, sending you off to die horribly at the edge of time where you're consumed by a purple gas cloud. Somehow these incompetent mofos regulated all of space and time and controlled how things were supposed to function in the Marvel Cinematic Universe up to this point. Okay, this is a little bit of an inaccurate generalization considering Kang's true purpose for creating the TVA, but it still raises a lot of questions. If the TVA was made specifically to prevent an evil version of Kang from rising again, then why prune entire timelines and kill people who had nothing to do with Kang? The TVA shows us that they can detect and find their specific variants, going directly to them when they found Loki and Sylvie, which means that they'd likely be able to go directly after a Kang variant and take them out of the timeline. These assholes spent millennia killing entire timelines of people when all they had to do was go after a specific dude and variants of that dude. That's like using an RPG to get rid of an anthill 1,000 times over. If he who remains is somehow the nicest version of Kang, then this dude must be a grade A asshole. Also, why bother taking a variant out of the timeline if you're just gonna prune them and the timeline in the end? These mofos literally create their own problems. You really trying to convince me that the TVA agents would put up a fight against the Avengers or Thanos when they're normal humans who can be harmed by fire? What good is all this OP-ass time technology if the people who use it are capable of dying as easily as a normal human and have to regularly face people that aren't normal humans? Loki doesn't even follow the rules it sets up. If the TVA is left unaffected by the timelines to the point that Asgardian powers and physical prowess and even Infinity Stones don't work in their dimension, then how did we get an alternate TVA where Mobius and B-15 don't know who Loki is? Don't think, consume, be excited for the next Marvel product. I'm sure they'll find some way to explain in the next season, but that shit's definitely gonna be a pass for me. I brought up the point about Eternal variants earlier, but now I realize that Eternal variants existing would likely make Celestials enemies of the TVA. I'm not even going to bother trying to figure out how that worked. And the worst thing about all of it is the Marvel humor. Marvel humor as it exists needs to fucking die. I don't know what they tell new creators to do in regard to how they implement humor, but for some reason Marvel flicks feel the need to continue on with this annoying ass brand of comedy writing that misses far more than it hits. Humor written by people who aren't even remotely funny. What is really funny to me though is how people now want to shit all over Joss Whedon, but a lot are really quick to try and copy the style of humor that he popularized with these movies. Like they couldn't find a way to be creative aside from doing what the most popular thing did. Everyone has their different tastes of humor and whatnot. I'll admit I like the occasional Marvel quip here and a funny moment with characters there.
How dare you attack the son of a...
But a good joke only works because of the timing and the writing behind it. The humor in Avengers works because of how it plays off the different personalities and moments for the characters involved. It also has several moments where they deliver humor without even explicitly telling a joke or throwing a quip in. The comedy works in Guardians of the Galaxy because of how prior moments with characters help set up those jokes. Guardians of the Galaxy is able to have its cake and eat it too because those movies had someone who actually knew how to write jokes that naturally came from the characters for the most part. The times when the humor falls flat are whenever it's an empty or nonsensical joke, a joke that fucks with the story and characters, a joke that goes on way too fucking long, or one that manages to do all three. Pulling out your dumb slapstick humor in the climactic battle of your superhero trilogy, for example, is a really great move for killing any tension in that scene. A terrible one if you want people to genuinely be invested in it, at least for me. The running gag of Tony's Mark 42 suit falling apart got really fucking old, and doing it even in the movie's climactic final fight just tells me that you don't take any of this shit seriously. Even when your main character is fighting for his life, you don't care about delivering the full payoff on the conflict you built up between Killian and Tony. Tony didn't even get the final win of this fight. This film couldn't even finish without making a fucking joke about the issues he was having. Isn't it hilarious how Tony had panic attacks so bad that he thought the shrapnel in his chest was killing him? Isn't it funny how Tony's suit constantly falls apart throughout the film? Isn't it just a riot that Tony is here trying to discuss his issues with one of his friends who's blatantly ignoring him in a comedic after credits bit? Why do you guys always want to treat your characters like jokes? Can you guys imagine how much less epic anime fights would be if they constantly killed the hype the way MCU films do? Every badass moment of a hero taking down villains would be so much worse if My Hero took its notes from the MCU and how they treated their big fights. Those epic moments we remember where characters pull through after having their backs against the wall just wouldn't hit the way they do if we're constantly killing the tension with humor. You're killing your own hype in a poor attempt to be funny, like the joke where Thor takes the train in Thor the Dark World after going through one of the convergence portals in his fight with Malekith. Bro, why not just run there? That wouldn't be an option for a normal human, but you're an Asgardian. I feel like Thor should be able to run or move really fast on his feet, the leap tall buildings in a single bound type of dude. Malekith is about to destroy the entire universe by spreading darkness through the convergence event. Move your ass. Please, Thor, move your ass. I honestly wanted Malekith to win after this scene. This isn't even mentioning the glorified sketch comedy flick Guardians wannabe that is Thor Ragnarok, the film that turns Asgard's darkest hour into a fun space adventure combined with comedic ad-libs from Jeff Goldblum and the whole cast.
What do I always say? She is the, and it starts with a B.
Trash.
No, not trash. Were you waiting to just call her that? It doesn't start with a B.
Booze heck.
None of the new Marvel shows are any different. Every new show has the same brand of shitty MCU humor that constantly whiffs. Wandavision pulls out the whole Modern Family commentary bit when they're trying to get back to town and find Wanda, all while Vision knows what she's actually doing to these people. He ends up just flying away instead of riding with Darcy, something he could have done this whole fucking time, but he was too busy dicking around like people's lives aren't at stake here. Then we have Darcy comedically crash into Hayward, somehow knowing he was in this car and where exactly he would be for her to hit him despite never seeing him before this point and being across town the last time we saw her. Oh, but she made a funny. Falcon and the Winter Soldier has Sam constantly joke around and being ass to his own allies in fights, laughing at Bucky while he's hanging on for his life, even laughing while the Dora Milaje try to kill everyone else, because it's funny when the African warrior women are needlessly aggressive. Zemo even pulls a comedic escape while looking at everyone else fighting like jackasses. When the fuck did this shit turn into Looney Tunes? Loki is a joke in his own show. They have him comedically get his ass beat by everyone else despite the skills he showed in the films they pulled him right out of, making a character that was once cool into a pathetic simp who wants to share a blankie with his new lover because two frost giants somehow got cold. I don't know what people are talking about and trying to say that these shows are any different from the shit we've always gotten out of the MCU. It's always the same shit with this franchise. Some jokes try to be more clever by doing subversions for the audience, the writers essentially pulling a "ha nigga you thought" moment to make you laugh about a previously built up plot element in the story, which sounds like a neat idea and concept. However, the actual practice has only given us results that fall flatter than a fresh pancake block. Want some syrup with that? Nick Fury's eye being scratched out by Flerken rather than him being betrayed by someone he trusted is one of the worst examples of this. What the fuck does this actually amount to other than saying, haha, he got his eye scratched out by a cat. Isn't that funny, guys?
It's not funny! It's never been funny! It's never gonna be funny!
It only serves to make a character who was once badass look incredibly stupid. I'd much rather not have known how Fury lost his eye at all than watch this dumb shit unfold on my screen. You also got the whole Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3, which killed so much of the hype for that movie and gave us Aldrich Killian, who gives me a lot of Syndrome vibes, just with a lot less charm.
And got busy!
Trevor Slattery did come back in Shang-Chi now that the real Mandarin is here, and I'm sure someone will tell me that him being held captive by the Mandarin worked in that film because of how he helped Shang-Chi, Shang-Chi's sister, and Katie escape and find Ta Lo with the help of the faceless winged creature from the village, and how he was funny in that film, which then begs the question of why the fuck did Wenwu leave him with his two captive assassin-level skilled children unbound while they were actively trying to thwart his plans to revive his wife? You're telling me this whole time that Wenwu had Morris and Trevor Slattery here, that he never found out that Morris knew how to get directly to Ta Lo, and he never came up with a way to guard the tunnels that his own daughter escaped from, and he didn't have any guards in his garage when they broke out? Even that prison teaser didn't amount to anything aside from plot convenience and more comedy. Is this really all that your subversion of expectations amounts to? Finding new ways to waste good actors for another fucking joke? We've gotten to the point that we make jokes out of the Infinity Stones and the brain-dead jackasses who guard them in the TVA.
Give me the Tesseract or I'll gut you like a fish, Casey.
What's a fish?
Infinity Stones?
We actually got a lot of those.
Yeah, some of the guys use them as paperweights.
How do you not know what a fish is? Why is the TVA letting y'all use Infinity Stones as paperweights? You'd think that people who monitor the entire space-time continuum would be knowledgeable of all kinds of things, let alone what a fucking fish is. This joke is also made worse with the added context that the TVA are all variants of different human beings on Earth. So there is definitely some point in time where this dude would have had to come across the concept of an animal living in water. Oh, but he didn't know what a fish was. Isn't that hilarious, guys?
Get cat!
Also, even if the Infinity Stones are useless in the TVA's dimension, you should still keep them in a secure location and not carelessly use them as paperweights. In the event a variant gets loose, like what happens in the fucking show, this dumb shit would run the risk of having one of them grab their paperweights and take them to a timeline where they actually can be used. Some might argue that the stones can't be used outside of their universe, but as Avengers Endgame shows, you can take the stones from another universe and use them in your own. Now, this could be argued that the stones only worked in this universe because Thanos destroyed the last set of stones, but as I've been discussing this whole video, this could change on a whim as well in the event they hire someone who ignores the previously established rules. All it takes is one person to come in and fuck everything up. The blatant stupidity of the TVA risks making a variant a much bigger problem just through their sheer incompetence. These dumbasses let a little frost giant girl go after she stepped on one of their feet and never caught her for years. If the TVA was smart, they would stomp out any chance of catastrophe on that level. That would mean writing them as a competent antagonistic faction though, so of course that's not the route they went with. Who needs effective villains when we can turn our previous MacGuffins into a funny? This is the type of shit I'm talking about. They've become far more dedicated to writing empty jokes that amount to nothing outside of the 3-second chuckles it gets out of the audience for the sake of subverting expectations. At this point in time, so many people pull that subverting expectations bullshit in their writing that it's becoming more original just to have a story told to us straightforward. I promise y'all, you won't lose any audience members if you took yourselves a little more seriously. Also, whatever happened to the notion that there'd be bad consequences for removing Infinity Stones from a timeline? Is that just not a rule now? Is the TVA itself that untold consequence the Ancient One was referring to? Is it Kang? As Black Widow shows, jokes now happen at the expense of character and morals. The whole prison scene had me questioning reality over the sheer carelessness and stupidity of everything. Like, how is this shit real? Yelena kills a bunch of prison guards doing their jobs because the super spies somehow thought bringing a helicopter in the middle of a prison during their attempt to bust out a convict was a good idea, resulting in an avalanche that buries everyone there after Yelena shoots a rocket at one of the guard towers. And what does she have to say about all this?
This would be a cool way to die.
Oh yeah, Yelena, buried in a mountain of snow, rock, and ash while slowly suffocating to death, or being left trapped inside a prison to wait on being rescued is such a cool way to die. Isn't that hilarious, guys?
cap.
I don't think there's any scene in the MCU that pisses me off more than this one right here. Forget how brain dead stupid it is for them to build a prison right underneath a snowy mountain that could and did fall right on top of them, but now characters who were once heroes who tried to save people are now okay with accidental genocide. Characters trying to make amendments for their past terrible actions have nothing to say when their ally kills hundreds of people with a smile on her face. Replacement characters can be horrible fucking people for no other reason than, haha, I'm a psychopath. This is the type of shit you have your villain do. Someone with such a blatant disregard for human life that they'd casually joke about taking it while taking those lives.
Well, well! Now that is beautiful! See? Look, Dodoria Zarbon! Look at the fireworks! Aren't they splendid?
I'm gonna make this pencil disappear. It's gone.
I swear, he's like a little kid. Hey, we missed one.
That's 10 more points. Ah, now we're tied.
I'll need some guys. Not these guys, because, well, they're kind of dead.
Whenever you have moments like these happen for the sake of idiotic jokes, you're basically shitting all over the prior movies. You're outright telling your own audience that you don't give a fuck about the moral quandaries raised in films like Civil War or Age of Ultron or even the first Iron Man film. You're especially telling them that the arcs that those characters went through mean nothing now. Black Widow's own solo film shat on everything that made her character redeemable before just so we could have another big bombastic Hollywood action sequence. Why should I take any future storyline about superhero collateral damage seriously now that you've done this? Why should I be invested in a character you want to bring in when she gleefully commits mass murder and suffers no consequences for it, while also pretending to be traumatized by her violent past? The writers clearly think their characters are nothing but jokes. These dumb motherfuckers think everything is a joke. Why should I take any of this seriously? Why should I be invested in anything if literally everything is subject to bad humor that destroys its own story? And sure, some might say it's weird for me to get on Yelena while defending John, but John at least suffered consequences for his actions. The show at least acknowledges what he did was fucked up. Black Widow treats Yelena's actions as pure fucking comedy, going to show just how empty and vapid Hollywood's constant virtue signaling is. All that constant talk of hyping female-led superhero flicks and having good representation for the little girls who watch it. What kind of message do you dumb fucks think they get when they see something like this? I'm not interested in adhering to comic canon that is discriminatory in any way or that violates my value systems. Oh, so this stupid ass scene didn't violate any of your supposed values at all? Okay. I should also say that I really just can't fuck with the idea of someone who's trying to be a hero being so nonchalant about gleefully murdering hundreds of people who were inconveniently in her way. What the fuck happened to heroes who care even a little bit about the lives lost around them? Characters that knew that just because they could kill people to make their lives easier doesn't mean that they necessarily should. I get it for killing characters like Dracos and some mofos just need to die. However, I can't help but be concerned about all the implications of this and WandaVision in particular. This pattern of characters who are supposed to be heroes doing villainous things and being excused for it in the story, and by the fans who deliberately ignore and excuse their heinous actions. It just sets a really troubling precedent for the MCU that I'm not a fan of in the slightest. I don't fucking care about their troubled past either. A troubled past does not give you the right to rob other people of their lives. It's a really bad sign when the MCU's heroes are starting to become more comparable to the volatile and reckless heroes of the DCEU. How hard is it to write you heroes as good people, for Pete's sake? The MCU is in a real dicey place right now. Financially not, of course, but as Venom shows, even turds in the wind can come flying back at you to ruin your day. But I'm just worried about what's next to come with how this phase of the MCU has been so far. Worried that it'll continue down this path of making light of its own universe while constantly baiting people with more sequels that all will likely fail to learn the lessons they need to from their predecessors. If it continues down this route of messing with their own characters and story ideas, then the future might not be so bright for this franchise. I imagine at some point there will be a Marvel entry so contentious, so controversial, so divisive, that'll be a true wake-up call for most people about where the MCU is headed. And despite the hoopla of Eternals, it seems that No Way Home has got everyone's hopes up again. Shit, I gotta make a video on that too, huh? My overall thoughts on the direction of the MCU are still the same though. I just hope that these future installments try to drop more of what made the MCU so bad at certain points. However, considering that all these shows and a few of these movies were adored by fans, that's not likely to happen. Looking back at the older films has made me see a lot of the lost potential the MCU has had over the past, while of course seeing all the previous highs as well. There were some movies that I didn't like that much that I came out having a new appreciation for. There were others that I previously loved that I thought either didn't hold up or just outright hated watching again. Overall, I came back with that same feeling of to a lot of it. That constant feeling of wanting more but never getting it due to the persistent blunders of the Hollywood superhero industrial complex. Thanks to all who stuck through this video to hear what I had to say, whether you agree or disagree. This essay took a few months to work on after I wrote it, and then went back and rewatched most of the MCU, which was a whole trip in of itself. Feel free to tell me your thoughts, positive or negative, in the comment section down below. I'm eager to read what you all have to say. Also subscribe so you can join me next time as I turn my critic crusade against the DCEU. That's gonna be a really fun time. Until then though, be easy out there, nerds.